everybody. Welcome to another weekly broadcast of our Surprise Church Bismarck Worship Anywhere presentation. We're so glad that you're with us. Please start the day by checking in on Facebook for Charity. Every 2 check-ins this month provides a meal for kids in need. So we are grateful for your willingness to check in and do good right at the start of our time together. Follow the text prompts that show up throughout this presentation so that you can get involved, get our app, take a step forward in your connection or your investment in our mission. And again, so thankful that you are here today. This month, we're doing a big volunteer celebration at Surprise. And we're super excited to have volunteers involved in our ministry. So you'll hear more about that in our teaching series. But we also have 2 individuals at Surprise that are elder candidates for our elder board. So Renee and Janelle are in their second of their 2-week period, which we call kind of our congregational notification period, where we just ask everyone to support us and support them in prayer, and certainly let us know if they have any questions or concerns about these 2 elder candidates as they prepare to join Jamie Ressler as the second and third individuals on our board, and then we'll fill our final elder role spot on our first ever Surprise Church elder board. So these folks are going to guard and celebrate and channel our energies and resources towards our mission, which is to surprise the world of God, or be the surprise of God to a world in need, and to be a church that leaves the building. And so we couldn't be more thankful for people at Surprise that are willing to step up and do that so that we can build the movement, not just in Bismarck, but wherever you're watching from, because we believe that God is calling us to expand the borders of his kingdom and to expand his family as wide as we can. So thanks for being with us today. And it's Mother's Day weekend. So if you're a mother, thank you. If you're a woman who has taken charge over and loved on people, whether you're an aunt, a grandmother, a next-door neighbor, a manager, a teacher, we want to thank all women who have played that mothering, nurturing, caregiving, Christ-adoring role in someone else's life. Whether you stay at home or whether you are a full-time CEO, God has gifted this world with women like you, and we're grateful for you this day. So we celebrate mothers and women that God has placed into our lives and communities. So we're thankful for you today. We're in a series right now called Why We Serve. Check out this preview, and we're going to dive right in. So important to remember why we serve. Check out last week's message as we talk about the first installment of this series. You know, if you want to catch the full spectrum of different concepts. But today's a standalone message that I think you'll appreciate the angle we take today. So when you think about Tom Brady or any really celebrity pro athlete that's uber successful, this guy's my age and he's still winning, Super Bowls. I mean, he's unstoppable. If you say, if you know a guy that says, I want to be Tom Brady, but he doesn't get off his couch. He wants to follow in Tom Brady's footsteps, but he's in college, and the only thing he's throwing around is the remote control and a hamburger. It's a bad plan, right? If you want to follow Tom Brady, you better follow Tom Brady and do what Tom Brady did to get successful, right? Same thing if you want to follow Mother Teresa. And instead of going to move to a desolate, poor part of the world, a third world nation, and a part of the world or part of the city or part of the country with huge needs that you can meet just like she did, instead if you just started stealing cars, that's a bad plan for following Mother Teresa, right? You're a carjacker. You're not a sacrificial servant, and you're not even on that road to get there. You're going as far in the opposite direction as you can. If you wanted to follow Carrie Underwood and be just a world-class country music artist, and your plan to get there was, I want to follow Carrie Underwood by being a gamer, and I stay up all night drinking soda pop, eating goldfish, not the pets, the actual cracker, and just playing video games. That's all I do. And I want to be Carrie Underwood someday. Anybody who cares about you would just say, you know what? I don't know what you're smoking, but you're crazy. That is not any way of following Carrie Underwood. If you want to follow Barack Obama, politics aside, some love him, some don't. Fine. If you want to follow in Barack Obama's footsteps, and so you become a professional skateboarder, I have news for you. That's a difficult transition from skateboarding. Even if you're a fantastic skateboarder, you're probably not going to get into politics and get elected. And you're certainly not going to become president. If you want to follow Barack Obama, don't become a skateboarder. What if you wanted to follow Jesus? Would you think about that with me today? What if, no matter what your career, your age, your race, your gender, your status, your nationality, your appearance, your size, your weight, what would you do if you wanted to follow him? It's a really important question for us. We can kind of wipe away all the religiosity to the side and just say, what does it mean to follow him? The good news is that he actually tells us. This does not need to be a mystery. This is not some Pandora's box of who knows, right? This is flatly and plainly spelled out in the greatest book ever written, Scripture. So what we're going to do is we're just going to look and listen and see what he says. Mark chapter 10, this is the end of a 3-chapter sequence in which Jesus has done the same thing several times. He has announced that he's going to be butchered and crucified and sacrificed to save the world, and his disciples completely don't understand it. And they do something that is egocentric, selfish, narcissistic, and snotty. And so he has to teach them what it means to follow Jesus. If you want to follow me, just like if you want to follow Tom Brady, Carrie Underwood, Barack Obama, whatever, this is what it means to follow me. So he has to constantly correct and reteach them about what it means to follow him. So here's Mark chapter 10. This is the end of a long sequence of correction. Watch this. They were on their way up to Jerusalem with Jesus leading the way. This is where they know that he's planning to go and sacrifice himself. And the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. Again, he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen to him. We are going up to Jerusalem, he said, and the Son of Man will be delivered. That will be arrested. That's what delivered over means. To the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, the non-Jews, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him, which means to shred their skin with a bone-laced whip. Often killed people just by whipping them, flogging them, and then kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. So the disciples hear all of this. They're aware and they're even afraid of the journey they're taking to Jerusalem during the Passover festival. It's going to be packed with people and packed with authorities that are watching and looking for Jesus, and they want to kill him. And Jesus says he's going there to be arrested, to be condemned, to be handed over to the non-Jews, to be crucified, because the Jews at this point, because the Romans were in charge, couldn't execute people. So the Romans, the Gentiles had to do it. And then he said, they're going to mock me, they're going to spit on me, they're going to whip me and kill me. And 3 days later, I'm going to rise. Now, the disciples are listening to all of this, and they hear something that triggers a reaction, but it's not what you might guess. They've heard these things before, but they hear this last phrase. This is all they hear. He will rise. And the reason we know that this is all they hear is because they're not being like, oh, Jesus, no. Oh, why are you going to do that? They hear, he's going to rise. And so the reaction is, well, we want to rise with you. We want the glory you're going to get when you go to Jerusalem. And so look at their reaction. When they hear he will rise, they think an ascent, a promotion to fame. They ignore the crucifixion. They ignore the whipping, flogging, spitting, arresting. They ignore the being killed part and just hear, oh, he's going to rise. It's time. We were waiting for Jesus to rise to power, and now it's going to happen. And so two of them start hatching a plan. Verse 35, then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. Now, if you have kids and they ever come to you and say, Mom or Dad, will you do for me whatever you ask? For Mother's Day, Mom, will you do for me whatever I ask? You know, if you're breathing, you know how to answer that, and that is, what do you want? If you're a parent, you never promise to give them whatever they ask. So that's what Jesus does. He says, what do you want me to do for you? No, I won't promise to do for you whatever we ask. They replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in glory. Again, all they heard and everything he said was, I'm going to rise. And so they say, oh, glory time. We want to reserve our seats. We want box seats with you in the best seat in the house, where we will be adored with you in glory. See, humans mistake greatness for popularity. Jesus calls us to be great. But the only way they could conceive of glory or greatness was by being raised up to power and promoted alongside Jesus to be adored by human beings. You know, to kind of have that tuxedo Grammy Awards speech of, look at us, we're on top now. That was the only way they knew how to conceive of a great life. I don't know how you think of a great life, but human greatness in general, when we think of humans, how humans define greatness, we think of being famous, we think of being praised, excuse me, we think of being revered by others, we think of being served by others. You know, that image of the guy in a pair of swimming trunks, like a bodybuilder, holding that heavy feather, and someone feeding you grapes. That's an image of human glory, right? Being served by people who bring you cold drinks as the waves splash against the shoreline of your beach house. Humans conceive of greatness in some way, shape, or form like that. Being well known, being revered, being famous, being respected, being served. But here's what Jesus wants you and I to know today. Human version of greatness will never make you more happy. And it's a recipe for being narcissistic and miserable. I don't know anyone who strives for human glory who is happy. Do you? I know many, many celebrities who have striven for human glory that have overdosed, that have committed suicide, that have lost their families and marriages, that have struggled to identify as some human being worth loving. Human greatness actually makes you more obsessed with yourself. When you strive to be great, you're always trying to look at yourself through others' eyes and be appreciated greater. And that is miserable. The happiest times in our lives are the times where we actually forget about ourselves, where we lose ourselves in service to something greater, to God and neighbor. And so if I am trying to achieve greatness by human standards, I am actually on a path towards being miserable and narcissistic, so trapped in a prison of my own self-absorption that I will never be happy. And Jesus then isn't trying to prevent us from accomplishing great things. He's trying to save you and I from being miserable. He didn't die to prevent us from enjoying life. You know, sometimes we fall into that trap of thinking like, well, I suppose I should be a good little Christian and not drink, not party, not dance, not watch R-rated movies, and then maybe I'll be happy. Well, Jesus doesn't want to prevent you from enjoying life. He actually wants you to have ultimate joy instead of misery that comes from pursuing human greatness. So he goes on, or the story goes on. When the other 10 disciples hear about this, right? When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant. They got angry with James and John. Jesus called them all together and said, you know that those who are regarded as the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. They flaunt their power, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great, you want to be great? I want you to be great. If you want to become great among you, you must be your servant. If you want to be great, you must be a servant. Whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even I, Jesus says, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus looked at James and John and said, you guys want to sit at my right hand and my left hand in my glory. You're gonna certainly do things that I have done. They had no idea the challenges and the suffering and the service that would follow in the decades after Jesus died. But he said, to sit at my right hand and at my left is not for me to grant, but for those to whom it would be prepared. Little did they know that the people who would be at Jesus' right and at left would be two thieves crucified with him on the cross. That was the moment where Jesus performed his ultimate act of service and came into his glory. Does that sound very glorious to you? Yet we celebrate the cross as the most glorious moment in human history, where God died for us. And who is at his right and his left but two people crucified with him? That's unknowingly what James and John were asking for. The sons of Zebedee wanted to be at Jesus' right and his left. When he comes into his glory, they thought he was going to be raised up to some popular, glorious position. And he says, I will be raised up on a cross. Do you really want to be at my right and left now? Very powerful, very ironic imagery. He said to him, you don't know what you're asking. Can you drink the cup that I drink? Be baptized with baptism I'm baptized with. They said, we can. Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I will be baptized with. They would be suffering as Jesus did suffer. But to sit at my right hand and my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom it has been prepared. They had no idea that when Jesus was in his glory, the ones on his right and his left would be crucified with him. See, human greatness is those things we mentioned before, but comparing human greatness to Jesus' greatness is like comparing a sheep to a giraffe. There's nothing like, there's no similarities. Instead of being famous, we want to make Jesus famous. Instead of receiving praise, we want Jesus to be praised, and we love to worship and praise him ourselves. Instead of seeking to be honored, we want to honor him. And instead of seeking to be served, we want to serve. And we want to serve him. We want to serve him through serving others. These are as far, this is like North and South Pole. This is like heaven and hell. This is death and life. These are as far apart as you can get. Human greatness is the opposite of God's greatness. And that's why Jesus died, to save us from the misery that we achieve by seeking human greatness, so that we can live in the joy of Jesus' greatness. I want to ask you a question here. If you look at this spectrum, with human greatness on the left and the narcissism and the misery that it promotes, and Jesus' greatness on the right, which truly is great and leads to great joy, where do you see yourself? Be honest. If in the middle is 5, do you see yourself on the right as a 10 or on the left as a 1? Somewhere in the middle is probably where a lot of us find ourselves. Maybe a little bit too far to the left. Maybe you and I can be honest enough to say we struggle with the human version of greatness. When I first became a pastor, I'll be honest, I wanted to be a great pastor. And a great pastor, I thought, was having a huge stadium full of people. I someday wanted to be a church that built a giant building, and everyone would come to hear me talk and then tell their friends to come and hear me talk. As I've gotten older and as I've really thought about what would a successful church look like, what does a successful pastor look like, what does a real legacy look like, I decided I don't want to be a part of that anymore. So I wanted to start a church that didn't even own a building. I wanted to create a church that would plant other churches and send people and money away, because this is not about getting to be great in this life. It's about making Jesus great and serving and sending people out to serve. And I'm finding myself way more happy doing that than just clamoring for attention. 2 2 chapters earlier, Jesus made a similar announcement. And Peter, the primary disciple, Peter overheard him make this announcement and challenged him. Look at this. He then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. Again, he hammered that point over and over and over. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. This is Peter taking God aside and just giving him a tongue lashing. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. "Get behind me, Satan," he said. "You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." He calls Peter Satan, and he turns his back on him because Peter was so concerned about human glory and greatness and concerns that only humans would care about. He had no concept of God's greatness and God's design. And so he turned his back on Peter and said, "You are wrong, Peter. I need to sacrifice, I need to suffer, and I need to serve. I'm not going after human glory." Then, the very next thing he does is then he called the crowd to him along with the disciples and said, "Whoever wants to follow me must deny themselves, take up the cross, and follow me." Listen to these words. "For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it." What good is it for someone if they gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? This challenged me to ask, do I follow my cravings or do I follow Christ? Denying yourself and losing yourself is nothing short of saying no to the things you immediately feel like you want or need, saying no to human glory, to say yes to Jesus wherever that takes you. And serving is a way, I think one of the best ways, to deny yourself and follow Jesus. If you have not yet chosen to serve at Surprise, whether you're at a distance and want to help us with some virtual online things, forming a virtual group or a community group in your home, or helping us with all kinds of cool projects, or whether you're local and you haven't yet gotten involved, we want to give you a place to practice serving that is going to impact you as a servant in every other area of your life. We want to give you space to practice where it's safe so that you can move into everyday life and be a servant. If you say you want to follow Jesus and you don't volunteer and serve at Surprise, I question whether you want to really follow Jesus. Can you imagine Jesus showing up at church and only wanting to be served? He would never do that. And so when people show up at church and they're just kind of like, what kind of music do you have for me? What kind of snacks do you have for me? What kind of sermons are you going to offer me? I'm kind of like, are you looking for a bunch of people just to serve you? Or are you looking for a place to grow into the ultimate follower of Jesus and servant that you can be? If that's your plan, this could be your church. If not, move along. Move along, you're wasting your time. So if you're not yet enjoying the joy of serving, Jesus wants to save you from the misery of selfish Christianity, of consumeristic Christianity, of craving-based faith, that I do what I feel like for me. You will not be saved from your misery until you abandon that and seek glory from God. See, we all want glory in closing. If I'm a craving follower, I just want glory now. I want it from humans and I want it now. I want to be pleased. I want to be popular. I want to be pleasured. I want things now, immediate gratification. But if I'm a follower of Jesus, I believe that death isn't the end. So I don't need to squeeze every ounce of glory and pleasure out of this life that I can. I don't need to squeeze every ounce of comfort out of this life that I can. I can actually face discomfort knowing that even if it ends in my death, I am going to have glory, God's glory, the true glory later. So those of us who follow Jesus are only different than our former selves, and that we all crave glory. We just are willing to accept it later, which means Jesus followers are just more patient. We believe that death isn't the end, and that God gives true glory to those who serve him in this life. So if you want to serve Jesus and you want to do it for the right reasons, do it to follow him. If you want to go where he is, if you want to do what he does, then you have to imitate the steps that he's taking, which is he's a servant at heart. He came not to be served, but to serve. Believers are patient enough to serve now because God's glory comes later. Will you pray with me? Father, thank you that you serve. You served us on the cross and called us into the mission field to be people who make a difference in the world, not for the glory that comes from human beings, but patiently following Christ over our cravings for the glory that one day comes from God. Thank you for the joy that comes with that calling. And thank you that you wish to save us from the misery and the narcissistic pain that comes from living for the wrong kind of glory. Forgive us for living in that way and save us. Forgive us and transform us for living for the long-term glory and joy of Jesus. In your name we pray. Amen. Thanks, everybody.
There's nothing worth more that could ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, God. I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. There's nothing worth more that could ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. Oh, yeah. I've tasted and seen of the sweet